Hello and welcome back to WABAN. I am your host, the movie expert you know as Nim, and I am joined by some guy.
This was your plan.
This is my plan.
Some guy.
Yep. Well, that's the thing though, is like with this podcast is like, So I'm this movie expert. Everybody knows who I am, right? I'm from a YouTube channel that you can point to. People know my real name, or at least I don't hide it. But
Right.
To everybody listening, you are just some guy.
Right.
Because like this is the only thing you have online. You don't have a YouTube channel outside of this. You don't have, we're still not sure about your name. Like we call you the goodest boy, but like you kind of want to go with something different,
Yeah,
so
shorter, easier to say.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the whole idea of the podcast too is that like I'm the expert on the movies and TV shows, because I study film and stuff, and I want to make movies and all that kind of stuff. Whereas you're just like an average guy,
Yeah, I'm more the audience perspective of this.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the dynamic we like to go for here. So you're the average Joe. So I could call you Joe because you're the average Joe.
I don't particularly like the name Joe, I have to say.
Oh man, okay.
At least not for myself.
Yeah. No, you don't really come across as a Joe to me. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. The weird thing about all this is I actually really like my actual name, but I don't want to use that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think you have a good name. Yeah, I agree. That's a good name. But yeah, we're not going to share it here. Maybe someday you will. Who knows? We'll see.
Who knows?
Maybe we'll have a big reveal in like 20 years. We're still doing Imagine if WABAN is still going in 20 years and we still have like 5 listens every episode, but we're just continuing.
It doesn't grow at all.
Yeah, exactly. We have like one fan, like one regular fan who comments and stuff, and then like
they're like really supportive, but like they're just this one dude.
He's like, this is my favorite podcast. This is the thing that keeps me going in life. Nothing else matters. I mean, if that was the case, we would have to keep going because, if we're the only thing keeping this guy going, we gotta.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, maybe we would invite him on as a guest. We'd be like, you know what? Since you're such a loyal fan, you can be our next guest. It's like. It's fun to create little like scenarios, like this. Like, what if this happens 20 years from now?
It's not.
How many episodes would we be at in 20 years? Because if you think about it, like you'd have roughly 52 episodes a year if you do 52. One every week. So just let me do a little calculation here. 52
1,000
times 20. Yeah, it's a 1,040. So, yeah, that's realistic. We could get 1,000 isn't a whole lot. I mean, it is quite a bit, but whatever.
I think One Piece is like just over 1,000 episodes at this point, and that's been going on forever.
Okay, yeah, I don't know that. So
One Piece.
There are podcasts out there that are like daily ones. And it's like, so that you can get a lot more episodes in that way. You could be doing it for like 3 years and already be at 1,000 episodes if you did like a daily podcast. But we're not doing that. That's too much.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Once a week is fun. Anyways, I mean, we can stop rambling and talk about the actual topic if you'd like.
Let's get on with it.
So we're continuing our discussion on Bojack Horseman, which I've been really enjoying revisiting the show. We just watched season 3. Thoughts on season 3? Is it your favorite season so far? Least favorite? Middle of the road? Where you put season 3?
I mean, I think first season was the worst, but I can't say which
Right.
one was the best. I think the other two so far have been equal.
Like 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just like I can tell that it is good. It does a lot of things good. I get a few good chuckles out of it. It is so depressing.
Yeah.
I cannot enjoy watching it because it's just so depressing.
Yeah, I think that the thing is like it's not for everybody for that reason, I think, cuz like so like my girlfriend, I was watching it with her at one point and we made it like halfway through season 3, I think, or somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And she just stopped watching it with me and she's like, you can continue watching without me. She's like, it just depresses me too much. And I was like, okay.
Yeah,
I was like,
I fully understand that.
yeah, I was like, it's understandable. So yeah, and I mean that's but yeah, I'm able to handle that kind of thing pretty well. Like I enjoy when like shows or movies have like really intense emotions,
Right.
including, you know, sadness or like depression or whatever. You know, I really enjoy like something that really makes me feel something. And then like after, I'm pretty good at like after I'm done watching it being like, okay, I'm not in that mood anymore. You know, like it doesn't.
Right.
Whereas my girlfriend, it's sort of like if she's watching it, it might put her in a sad mood for like the rest of the day, you know? So it's kind of like everybody's different. So it really depends on.
I mean, I'm usually pretty good at making that separation. But
Yeah.
with Bojack Horseman, it's very consistently like down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, the entire time, you know, I watch it in like 12 episode chunks.
Well, that's true.
So it's
yeah.
just like, oh geez, the last like 3 hours I spent like severely depressed just watching this. Oh god.
Yeah. One thing I will say though is I think the comedy aspect of it does help a little bit. It helps balance it out. So it's not a constant onslaught of depression. It's like you get those, but you also get the lighter moments to help you have fun with it too. And you have like the Todd shenanigans and you have, you know. But
I do have to mention, it is kind of like it's less like, you know, you get knocked down, you get picked back up, and then you get knocked down, you get picked back up. It's more just like you're laying on the ER bed dying, and every once in a while someone just hits you with a defibrillator. Here's the comedy. There you go.
Ooh, that's a nice little hit. Yeah.
You're good for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. But yeah, we can go ahead and get started with talking about each individual episode,
right.
if you'd like. So the first episode is titled "Start Spreading the News." So this is the main like sort of story going on in this episode is Bojack's trying to win an Oscar. Right. He's hired a really good publicist who's like good at like helping actors win Oscars and stuff, you know.
Now, quick question. The Oscars are golden bunnies in this universe. Is Oscar the name of the guy that used to work at Princess Carolyn's agency?
No.
It wasn't that his name?
No.
That bunny guy?
No, I don't think so. No. I don't remember his name. It's not that. It's
because other than that's the only reason why I can think of why they made the Oscars bunnies.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think it is, but
I'm looking it up.
This is like half our podcast.
His name is Rutabaga. What am I talking about?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I knew it was something weird like that.
Why are the Oscars bunnies? Bojack.
Just because. Well, I think it's because like in real life, the Oscars are based on a person or whatever, like the design of them. And so they just decided that person is a bunny in this universe, you know, because some people are animals. So I don't think there's any specific reason probably, but.
Oh, all right.
You know.
I just found it weird and I wanted to know.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so in this first episode, this is the introduction episode, you know. It shows
he's working with that lady to get an Oscar and She's
Yeah.
making him go through all these interviews that he hates, and he's joking around about hating the interviews.
Yeah, and Todd gets lost, just in New York. I think I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, and then Mr. Peanut Butter's show ends because
right.
JD Salinger is like, I told my story. I don't want the show to go on too long, which is, I respect that. But I think one of the big things in this episode, for me at least, one of the big moments, because I feel like every episode has its most important moment of the episode, kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think for me, that was like, there was the part where he's like, so he's, been drinking a little bit at the bar, and he's interviewing with this, what is she, a manatee? I don't know, the one woman that he's interviewing.
I do believe it's a manatee, yeah.
Yeah, and then they're drinking and stuff, so they go back to his room or whatever to like have sex, and they start to, but then she says something that triggers a thought in his brain, like she mentions a boat,
yeah,
and that makes him think about the last episode, not the last episode, but the 11th episode of the last season, and the boat, and he actually starts to like talk about it, and it's like, yeah. So that's a good way of introducing the whole sort of fact that this is something that follows him no matter where he goes. It's sort of like he tries to move on from it and be like, you know what, it happened in the past, let me just leave it in the past. Right. But no matter what, it still follows him. And I think that's a really poignant moment. And I think that's a good thing to include in the first episode, because it sort of like establishes that as like a thing. And that's sort of an important thing later on, other points in the season too, is that like things like that just follow him. And he can't, as much as he would like to just move on and be like, you know what, I did that in the past. It's in the past. Let's move on. You can't, you can't let go of those things.
Right. He asks like what he's supposed to do to her, and she's just like, keep moving forward. He's like, that's all I've ever done.
Right. Yeah. Because and if you remember, that's the same thing that the same advice that Secretariat gave him on that talk show back in
Never look back,
at the end of season 1.
Running.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that they keep bringing that theme back, that it's like that. It's almost like ever since he saw that Secretariat say that, he's always sort of like internalized that and been like, let's, I got to keep doing that. So I really think that's the most poignant moment of this episode. And then obviously there's the whole, like, the next morning when he's sober and stuff, he's like, oh shit, what did I do? Like she might share this with everybody. People might know what happened. Why did I tell her? And then obviously Anna Spanakopita, his publicist, is like, don't worry, I handled it. So, which is interesting. It doesn't get into how she handled it. It's just, she just goes,
never see that manatee again, at least in this season.
Yeah. No, I don't think she like was murdered or anything. The way you said that made it sound like it was like she had her killed. You never see her again. I don't think so. So I think this is something that comes up again in another season. I could be wrong. I believe. I don't know. Anyways, we'll find out if it is. It's, I haven't seen the show. It was like over a year ago now that I saw the show last. So,
right.
But yeah, we can move on to the next episode if you'd like.
Sorry, sure.
Okay, unless there's anything you want to say about that.
No, it was a fairly simple episode.
Yeah. Next, we have the Bojack Horseman show.
Right.
Which gives us
the entire thing sets in 07.
Backstory, yeah.
What was the changed theme song? I can't talk today.
Oh, at the end of the episode?
Yeah, back in 07, I was in an unsuccessful TV show.
Yeah, they changed it at the end, which I like how they did that. That's kind of fun. Because, changes the usual closing thing. So this is interesting because, so far
We haven't heard about this at all.
Yeah. Like, we just assumed that the last thing he did was horsing around and that he's done nothing since then. But it's like, oh, here was an attempt to do something. And we also get, like, in this season, you learn that, like, Princess Carolyn actually was a really good agent and actually did get him a lot of jobs that just fell through because he didn't do them because he was, being Bojack. But this is one that he actually did end up doing. They did. I think it's they say that, like, they only did like one season because nobody liked the show. But it's and you get the backstory with, like, what's his name, Cuddly Whiskers,
something like that. The hamster man.
Yeah, he's like an extremely successful TV show writer and, like, TV show and movie writer. And creator, like, very successful, but he's, like, bored with it. Like, he's like, which it's interesting because they bring up this whole idea that, like, just because you're successful doesn't mean you're happy. You know what I mean? Which is
right.
Something you already get a little bit with Bojack because Bojack has had success in his career. But I feel like you get it even more. You get a reflection of that in Cuddly Whiskers, right? Which is part of why I think the two characters connect well. Because they sort of
through the same stuff, or at least
same
stuff, different brand maybe.
They both want something to do something different with this show. So they're like, well, we're both not happy with, like, the success we've had. What if we did something completely different? That's what's going to really that we're going to make something really important. And obviously it doesn't turn out good. And I really love the scene of them, like, coming up with the ideas and stuff. It's actually funny because you get him being like I'm trying to remember, like, he has a catch.
Yeah.
He has a catchphrase like, "What's up, bitches?" But not that.
Like that. That's terrible. But something like that.
We'll change it. And then they never change it. I really like that whole concept of, like, you go with, like, a placeholder name of something. And you're like, we'll change it, and then it never gets changed. Kind of similar to, like, Hollywood stars and celebrities. What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out. And they're like, we can work on the title, but that sounds like a good idea. And then
the title is perfect.
They never change it. Yeah. So, I mean, it goes through the whole backstory of the Bojack Horseman show, which is, interesting. And kind of important for the next episode too.
Right. Well, they also started something with Todd, right? Because they introduced the character of his, like, childhood friend, potential girlfriend.
Which is because they go back to 07. So Todd's, like, a teenager, like, in high school or whatever.
That's also the origin story of his cap, of his beanie. They switched beanies when they were gonna.
Oh wait, yeah, you're right. I always like, sometimes I forget these details. So that is actually kind of fun.
Because as soon as I saw young Todd, I was like, "That's the wrong beanie. It's not Todd's beanie. What are you trying to pull here?"
And then they switch them, and you're like, there it is. Everything has a beginning. Yeah, this is actually interesting too, because, like, that's sort of like the side plot of this episode, but you're kind of like, or a side plot of this episode, because I guess they also have a side plot with Diane a little bit.
Right. Mr. Peanut Butter.
She first meets because it's like Mr. Peanut Butter's still married to his second wife. Because Diane is his third wife.
Had that many wives? What
Diane is his third wife, right? Because remember, at the end of the season, his first wife shows up.
Oh,
we'll get to that.
I heard that they used to be married, and I was like, wait, is she the one from the flashback? Because she looks nothing like the one from the flashback.
No. So she's his first wife, which you get more with them later on.
Mm-hmm.
But so she was his first wife, and then Jessica Biel, who is a real actress,
Right.
is his like second wife. So
Weird.
Jessica,
Okay.
that's un-Jessica believable. Like they constantly make jokes with her name every time she's in an episode. It's great. But yeah, no. So when the Todd story was going on, though, like you at first you're like, okay, well, Todd had this friend back in high school, but you're kind of like, is this like important? But then
it's an interesting backstory, but
yeah, you're like, is this important? But then later on, she returns, and you're like, oh, this is important, and
right, it builds up a thing that happens later in the season.
Yeah, which is a really important plot point, and also really important, good character development for Todd, I think. Because the thing is, like, so far in the show, Todd is just kind of like, he's a good, fun character. But like,
he
there's
doesn't
not
develop at all. Yeah,
he's not very deep, right? Like, he's just the fun character who goes on all these crazy adventures and has all these shenanigans, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is when they started to want to really develop the character, and I think it definitely is a strong. It definitely really strengthens the character, and it continues, as the show goes on as well. You see more of it, but this is a good starting point for that, for his real
definitely
character development. But yeah, so and then Diane's story is like back in 2007, she meets Mr. Peanut Butter for the first time. When she meets him when he's still married to Jessica Biel. Blarn,
that was it. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. And there's like the moment she like meets him backstage and he like takes his shirt off and she's just like, ooh. I'm like, okay. I always find that part funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It's kind of cool backstory as well.
This is a very weird episode, isn't it? Because the entire thing is a flashback.
Yeah, it is. Because, well, it opens. Is this the one that opens where like he's in bed with Princess Carolyn and she's like, that's weird, having sex with you, and at first you think that it's the present day, and you're like, oh, I thought you're like, I thought they didn't have sex with each other anymore. I thought that was like over at this point. You're like, that is weird. But then she's like, and then you realize, and then they mentioned that it's 2007, and you're like, oh, this is like around when they first met. Like, not when they first met, but like around when they, or well, I guess they would have first met before that. I think they first met in the 90s or whatever. Because it's like she was the assistant to his previous agent.
Yes. Yeah. And they also mentioned that that might have been this episode, probably another episode, but that she met him the second time they met was on the set of Horsing Around. So they met while that was in production, so somewhere in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because the first time and I think they showed that backstory later on in the season when they were talking about it, but like, yeah, because you can see like the first time they met, she has a very like 90s hairstyle and stuff, They
and the jean skirt.
I love how they do this thing where like whatever decade it is, they make it blatantly obvious what decade it is. Like in 2007, he's like because remember in the first season where they did the 2 flashbacks that were like, or was it the second one?
I don't remember, but I do remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, where they did the flashbacks from like, I think it was the first season. They did one who was in the 80s and he's sitting there and everything's obviously 80s and he's like, this is a generic 80s rock song or whatever, like a generic 80s pop. And then like in the 90s, he's like, generic 90s grunge song. Like they have songs that are like,
Yeah.
and then they do that again in this episode, but it's like, you know, he's like, oh, everything is auto tune, and like, you know, whatever
so
song he was listening to.
Weird.
Yeah. But yeah, do you have anything else to say about this episode?
No, we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, you probably should. It's like we're at 25 minutes, so you know.
Yeah.
Next is Bojack Kills.
Right.
So this goes into this whole like mystery thing, which is kind of fun. Where like,
because it opens by introducing what's the name? Something with a G?
Goober.
Goober?
Well, that was
Goober, was it?
That was his name on Horsing Around, like his character on Horsing Around's name.
Right.
He was. I think it was Goober, yeah. And then I forget what his real name is. But I just have to say, his business that he runs is so wrong and just...
Oh, yeah.
a sexy time for the whole family. Like, what? And there's the scene where they, like, pay for, like, a lap dance or whatever so they can talk to the whale.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, like...
children.
She, like, says something, and she's like, hey, there's children in here. And then you look over, and there's children getting a dance, too. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But it's funny because they say like, oh, it's like it's supposed to be like a parody of like a Whale World type thing where it's like you're seeing, you know, like what do you call it? What's the, you know, place where you go see whales and stuff?
An aquarium?
No, but like the famous one. Is it? What's it called?
Whale World, a whale show? I don't know.
No, whatever the place is called. You know, I should know this, but anyways, you know, anyways, like that type of place, like an aquarium type of place. But like obviously in the Bojack world, everything is like every animal is like humanoid, so that makes it weird.
So it's like a thing with the chickens last season.
Yeah, where it's like making the animals humanoid makes certain things that would happen in real life and be normal be like really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they do it anyways just to show how weird it is. And it's like, it's just so weird.
Well, because like most shows that like, you know, do this anthropomorphic animal thing would avoid stuff like this to not get into the weird intricacies of their world. But Bojack Horseman's just like, yeah, it's weird, deal with it.
Yeah, I kind of like that though, because it's just, it adds to the absurdity of some of these things and like situations and stuff. But yeah, and then there's also the whole, and like, so Diane is with him because she's working for Princess Carolyn's new company as like a social media person, like where she posts stuff for celebrities on social media.
Right.
So she's following him so she can like post on his Twitter and stuff. And I really think it's funny that they do the whole like, they're like, Bojack is going to kill me. They're like, somebody's trying to frame you for murder. But it's literally not even talking about him. It's talking about the heroine named after him.
Right. I did like that the end of this episode where, you know, there's Goober and, you know, Bojack goes into this whole like epiphany monologue of like, you resented me all these years and blah, blah, blah. And so you stuck my face on the heroin stuff because, you know, you hate me. And this whole like detailed thing is like, no, it's because heroin's called horse and you're a horse.
Yeah. And still by the end, when the police officer he says what his name is, he still gets his name wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first time he comes in, he's like, yeah. Yeah, you could say my real name. He's like, I want to say Goobert.
Oh, you didn't come for me, did you? Just immediately gets depressed over it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think one of the most interesting moments of this episode, so like most of this episode is just this crazy, wacky, like mystery thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, they finally find where Cuddly Whiskers is, right?
Yeah, that was a weird time because like he delivers a line that's like, I think Diane says that, don't you feel guilty? Isn't that kind of selfish that you just abandoned everything? It is just like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm happy now for the first time in my life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what he
Like,
says. He's like, I'm happy. I'm not going to apologize for it,
yeah.
Yeah. That's like
That,
one of the most poignant moments is like the end of this episode that is like brought up a lot when talking about the show. People talk about like the different things and aspects of the show because it's like this idea of like he says like you're responsible for your own happiness. You have to do what makes you happy. Like,
mm-hmm.
and it's interesting because it's like despite the fact that he was really successful and he was praised for like so many like TV shows and movies that he wrote and stuff, like he won an Oscar for it at
None of
one
it made him
point,
happy.
and he was just like, yeah, like sometimes you would think that like, oh, getting your success, and that's actually kind of an interesting mirror to Bojack because right now in this season Bojack is trying to win an Oscar
Mm-hmm.
to make, because he thinks it might help make him happy, or at least that's part of the reason. And you kind of see that, well, that didn't even make him happy, Cuddly Whiskers happy. So will it make Bojack happy? It kind of raises this question, and this is early on in the season too. So it kind of raises this question with the whole
Right.
thing. So yeah, that's like a really interesting moment. And, and that adds to like the overall theme of the show in general, which the whole main theme of the show is sort of the, Bojack trying to be happy because Bojack is obviously, has depression.
Yeah.
Probably should get a therapist, but yeah.
Yeah, that one line hit me quite hard.
Yeah. And it's, that's, it's definitely a really important line to take away from the show is like that idea of like, you're responsible for your own happiness, like if you're doing what makes you happy, like you don't have to apologize for it. You're
Right.
You're happy with your choices,
This,
unless the thing that makes you happy is like murdering people or something, then
yeah, don't do that.
Right.
No.
Then you definitely need some serious therapy or something. I don't know.
But this entire thing reminds me, at some point in school, it was probably like elementary school, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The school guidance counselor was in the classroom, and we all sit gathered around him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a kind of like a career talk kind of thing, I guess.
Right.
And he asked like what the end goal of all of it was, like what the end goal of getting an education and getting a job and doing work and getting money was.
Yeah.
And the thing that always stuck with me about that was no one said it. No one said that the end goal is for them to be happy.
Yeah.
It we were sat there for a while until he finally just said it to us, so we can gain the ability to be happy. But none of those kids in that room ever thought of that answer, which I hated.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's like a lot of people don't really focus on as much as you'd think. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, so why do you do what you do in life? And I think at the end of the day, the number one thing is so you can have a good life, you can enjoy your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can be, which is being happy. And it's like a lot of people don't necessarily fully think of that all the time.
Yeah. Well, like my first thought, like in that was like, if that is the end goal and you want us to know that answer, why has our school system not reflected that? Why has that never been instilled in us?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an interesting thing because it's like the way a lot of societal things are set up is to help society keep functioning and running and to, give people jobs so they have something to do. But it's like, is that necessarily, gonna make people happy? Well, not necessarily. It's
society has ended up, or at least economy and like the workforce has ended up more like a production, like a factory, rather than just a simple earn money so you can get what you need and be happy.
Yeah, live life to your fullest, and I mean, at the end of the day, whatever happiness is different for everybody, right? Like, for some people, creating really successful TV shows and stuff might make you feel happy, but for Cuddly Whiskers, it didn't. Like that's not him going off on his own, living in this place he did. That's what made him happy. So it was that's what matters to him. It's really that is one thing I really like about this show, and I think that's one reason why I wanted to talk about this show in particular, and I thought you would find this interesting as well, despite how you think of the show, is that it does raise a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah, definitely.
About, these kind of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't enjoy watching the show. It's much too depressing for me. But all of it's probably good for me to think about, to consider all these angles and consider this like absurd point of view from like, that's clearly like a parody making fun of our own society and reality.
Right. Yeah. But also having some real truth in there as well, you know? Yeah. I actually was watching recently these like YouTube videos about where actual like psychiatrists and stuff were reacting to like episodes of Bojack, and like they would watch it and they were like discussing it along the way, like, oh yeah. And psychiatrists actually really like this show because they say that it actually is like one of the most realistic depictions of like depression and things like that, like in any media that we have. It's actually, which is funny because it's like it's this very weird, crazy, wacky world where ridiculous situations happen, anthropomorphic animals and stuff. Yet it's the most realistic depiction of depression in media, you know what I mean? Or one of the most, at least. And it's
a very interesting contrast because like you said, there is all this absurdity in it, but it has this very real anchor to it that just keeps it locked into reality.
Yeah, and that's the reason it's one of my favorite shows, because I personally really like the sense of humor it has and the comedy and stuff, but like, there's more to it than that, and that's why I love it so much. But anyways, we can move on to the next episode if you'd like.
Yeah.
Well, I went on a whole thing there.
I don't know. That line just really gets to me.
Yeah, no, that is a really good moment, a really poignant moment of the show. Next, we have Fish Out of Water.
Is this the one that's like entirely silent?
Yeah, except for like the beginning, the opening, and then the very end. Yeah, and the rest of it is silent. So,
give me a second. I'm going to take a drink.
It sounds like you're like, got to take a shot for this episode, That's what it sounds like.
Or last episode.
I mean, I'm sure the drink is water, but you know.
It is water, yeah. I'm not old enough to drink, and I don't think I will start ever.
Really, like
Yeah,
not
I
even like
just,
a social drink or anything like that.
I don't know. My dad doesn't drink. My sister and my mom drink a little bit every once in a while, but I don't, it just doesn't appeal to me, you know? I don't see the point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could try it once just to see what it's like, but it's yeah. If you don't want to, though, that's also
Yeah,
yeah. It all depends on what you want.
but
Yeah.
Bojack goes underwater.
Anyways, let's stop talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So BoJack goes underwater because they have a whole press advanced screening of the movie, and he has to be there to like try to because I guess there's some members of the academy that are underwater
Mm-hmm.
in this underwater city. It's like
Yeah, you see that director, the fish director, the catfish director, that was it. And he has a gone fishing hat, which I found ridiculous.
oh yeah,
Like, you are a fish. What do you mean gone fishing?
yeah. That's so weird. I like, yeah. So he goes down. So I guess like the main plot of this episode is that Kelsey Jennings is down there because she's there like for a movie that she made or something,
Right.
a different movie. And he's like nervous about that because obviously, last time he saw her, they did that whole filming the scene that they weren't supposed to, and she got fired, and he feels really guilty about it.
I like the message that he ends up writing to her in the last, that he ends up trying to show her.
Yeah.
Because, like, it was, sorry for getting you fired. Sorry for not calling you after.
Yeah.
Which is like a callback to
Herb,
right?
yeah,
Because he said, I'm not mad that I got fired or that you got me fired. I'm mad that you weren't there for me afterwards.
yeah, and it's that's sort of like a common pattern with BoJack is like he messes up with somebody and he doesn't. It's hard to get himself to like reach out to them because
Right.
he doesn't. He feels it might be because of he so like looks down on himself so much. Maybe he feels that like he doesn't deserve to talk to them again, or like he thinks he's just gonna harm them even more, or maybe he feels that it's just not, they probably hate me now anyways, like it's sort of this thing where because yeah, and he should have called her after she got fired and talked to her because they did sort of have a connection, a good like connection that they made with each other, and so they did kind of become friends in a way, but he just kind of doesn't know how to deal with that, I think, is the thing, and so he just avoids it.
Yeah.
And it's like the only time he thinks to actually talk to her is when he naturally just sees her somewhere instead, like he didn't go out looking for it. Like, for instance, with Herb, he finally talks to him again and apologizes and stuff when he just naturally gets a chance to, because he finds out that he's dying and he wants to go see him before he dies, and it's like, and it's like, yeah, it's probably a little too late now, it's like you probably should have done, apologized before, but
right.
yeah, I think that definitely is one of those character traits that like is interesting just because like it adds a lot to the whole depression, looking down on yourself kind of thing. Like he definitely has a little heavy like self-loathing and stuff. Yeah.
There's also he's on the bus, the seahorse comes up and he helps the seahorse have babies, but one of them gets stuck to him. And so there's this whole
side plot of him trying to
get the baby back to him, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like he gradually comes to enjoy having that baby with him, and by the end, when he finally hands it off to the guy, he's like sad about it.
Yeah, it's this sort of bittersweet moment where it's like, oh, the guy's reunited with his kid, and you're like, this is nice. But then he's like looking, and he's like smiling and stuff. He's like, oh, he's reunited. But then he like thinks, like, you see his smile kind of fade away as he looks, and like the kid isn't even really paying attention to him now. He's just, you know, because I mean, it is like a little baby, you know, like just paying attention to like, oh, the food that it has or whatever, you know, seeing its father or whatever.
Right.
And then he just kind of is like, oh yeah, like I thought we made it, you know. He's like, man, maybe I didn't make a real connection there. I don't know. Like, it's kind of this. And even like the dad even comes and he's like, hey, you want to hang out and have some food? And he's just kind of like, no, like I have to leave.
Right.
So yeah, it is kind of a sad little moment because it's like that whole side plot is kind of weird. Like
it's very weird, especially considering that all of it is silent.
Yeah, it's that it does a really good job at doing the silent storytelling thing, right? Like
oh yeah, definitely.
You feel every emotion, every emotion and moment. You get everything, you know. You get all the information completely silently. So it was definitely an interesting. I think the episode was a very interesting experiment because obviously, you know, a huge part of the show is its dialogue, right? Like that's probably one of the biggest, you know, things about the show is its dialogue is really poignant and interesting and good.
Yeah, but because you know how people say things and what they say specifically.
Yeah,
or like, you know, what meaning it has to that character can change.
Yeah,
but this doesn't have any of that. It just it takes all of that and just throws it away.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It is kind of an experimental episode. Yeah, because it's like let's just do a silent episode, which is very, and it actually is pretty. Like it's still a pretty good episode. You know, it's weird, but it's like interesting.
I just remember him going down in there, and I'm like, you know, underwater. And I'm listening to this and I'm watching and I'm like, this is going to be the whole episode, isn't it? Like, they're actually doing this, like, no dialogue? Like, okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm weirded out. I'm interested. I'm weirded out. And this is, like, a low-level discomfort because it's, like, very weird.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm used to, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's so weird because it's like you go through the whole episode being silent and then it goes back to like, there's the end part where he finds out that you can like use the thing and talk. And he like, you hear a line of dialogue and it just feels so weird to break from you got used to the silence at this point and only hearing like, you know, that the kind of nice music that they had for the episode and just hearing like, you know, the fish talk or whatever, the fish language kind of thing that you don't understand. Yeah. And then suddenly you hear an actual voice saying something and you're like, whoa, it's like jarring for a minute to go.
Just pulls you out of it.
And then there's just that final moment of the episode where he turns his on and he's just like, oh, come on. Cause like, you know, if he had known that, he could have actually talked to Kelsey, but he went through this whole process of trying to write her a note, and then it failed. And it's kind of sad too, because like, you know, he's genuine in his like in his apology and stuff, but like he
At
can't
least in his own Bojack sort of way.
Yeah, like I think he's genuinely sorry and stuff, and he genuinely wants to like repair the relationship he has with her if he can, the friendship he has, but he just can't because of the situation. It's just he can't, you know. So it's kind of frustrating in a way, but it's like, you know, yeah.
The only other thing I have to say about this episode, just the throwaway cleverness of that seahorse man working at a saltwater taffy factory.
Yeah.
Because, like, yeah, they're in saltwater. Make saltwater taffy. There you go.
That makes sense, yeah. It is kind of interesting though that they introduced this whole like new world under the water that you never knew about in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of interesting because it's like, well, if every animal in this universe is like humanoid in some way, then yeah, why wouldn't there be like a whole city and stuff underwater,
Right,
under the ocean?
Land mammals walking around. You've seen the birds flying.
You've even seen some water creatures on land too.
Yeah. But you've never seen like an underwater city where all the water creatures live. Like,
yeah,
oh, there it is.
So like, yeah, based on it, like it's something you never think about until this episode, but it does make sense because all the animals are humanoid, so why wouldn't the fish be too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think we've actually seen anything that burrows yet, though. Have we? Or at least none of it that's been like.
Yeah, like main thing.
Yeah, actually burrowing in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm trying to remember if there is later on. Maybe, I don't know. But
I would really love if they just did. Well, I guess they did kind of do this in this episode when it's really dark and then all the eyes stop popping up and then he.
Oh yeah, because it's like
it turns out it's just like this one dude with a bunch of eyes and a huge head.
Yeah, well, yeah, because
I really want like just random monstrous creatures, like something that lives like so deep underground and then like a little pool of salt water.
Yeah, but like a humanoid version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called, but like those small little like lizard fish things that like they're so deep underground that they don't need any light. They just use vibrations in the air to see, and like they're clear because there's no sunlight or anything like that.
Yeah, they did go down to the deep part of the ocean for like a minute in the episode, but they saw like the guy with all the eyes, but yeah.
I just want to see something like very disturbing turned into a human being.
Yeah, that's true. So the next episode, which is episode 5, we're only on episode 5.
Okay, speed round.
Speed round, let's go. This one's called Love and / or Marriage. So this is the one where they so Bojack, I'm trying to remember. I think this is the one where the movie finally comes out and he's like, and it gets a lot of good reviews and a lot of people saw it and liked it and stuff. And so he's, really happy about that. And they're like out and he's like, yeah, I'm a movie star. And this is where Emily comes in, because this is the one where Emily's like, oh, my friend's I have to go to this dumb rehearsal dinner for my friend or whatever. And Bojack's like, well, I'm a movie star now, so people love it when movie stars crash their weddings, So yeah, it's him. It's that happening, and then it's also, I think that's sort of the main thing. Well, I'm trying to remember. There's like a few different things going on, but that's like the main thing with like Bojack and stuff is that, and like Todd and Emily meeting up again, and
Emily continuing where she left off and trying to pursue that relationship, and Todd just being like, awkwardly avoiding it.
Well, it's
for an unknown reason at that point.
Yeah, and it's not that he's avoiding the relationship. He likes her and likes being with her. It seems that he's like, because she clearly wants to like go into her room alone with him, and
he's
what happens
the
then.
Sexual aspect.
He's avoiding sex specifically. Which is interesting because at the end of the episode, it's like Emily was really wanted sex with him, but was rejected. And so she just kind of does it with Bojack instead.
Well, they don't show that.
They don't show it.
In this episode, at least.
But
well,
yeah.
It just kind of ends.
That's
like
true. That's true.
Like, hey. And it cuts and you don't know what happens.
You don't know until the one later episode. That is true.
Yeah.
One thing that I found really interesting was the wedding thing. Like, so like Bojack, it comes in and the guy's like, oh, give a speech for the wedding. And he's like, yeah, it's always great when you find that person that completes you and everything. And then like the one bride is like, she's like, do I know that she's the right one? And,
right. And then he gives that whole speech in the bathroom of like, that's a lie. You don't ever know. And, she might not be the one, but, you have to settle or, you're just going to keep searching and searching to fill that hole, but you're never going to fill that hole.
Yeah. And it's like when he's saying that, he's very much talking about himself too. Mm-hmm. It's like, he's like, yeah, you'll just end up sad and alone. And I think one of the most poignant lines that he says is like, you get to the point where everybody loves you, but nobody likes you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that hits pretty deep because that's kind of the way where Bojack is right now, right? Especially now because everybody loves him right now because the movie just came out and everybody loves him in the movie. But nobody likes him, it's kind of this.
There was the book that came out and, everyone just kind of, they either hated him or they just loved him because he, said things that they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And now the movie is out and, that compounds. And so, they love him for his work, but not for who he is.
Yeah. But the interesting thing, though, about this is that there are people who like him for who he is in his life. He just doesn't see that in a way because like his friends do legitimately like him for who he is, like Todd and and Diane, Princess Carolyn, even Mr. Peanut Butter, you know what I mean? But he's so deep in his self-loathing that he doesn't see that.
Right.
Which is an interesting thing because it's like that is a very real part of like depression and stuff, right? Is people, you have this view of yourself where you think nobody likes you even when people do.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting. But yeah, no, that's a very poignant line because it's like it's good if people like you, but you have to know, like but if you don't think that they like you, then that can really affect you.
Yeah. It's the idea that, you don't live in the actual reality. You live in your perception of reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in your perception of reality, you are like the worst person ever. Mm-hmm. And nobody likes you and you're terrible.
If that's the way you view it, that is the way your world is. Even that's not the way the actual world is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't matter what really is. It just matters what you think it is.
Yeah, and that's like what leads to, his alcoholism and all that kind of stuff too, is like this, I mean, depression and stuff, but we can get more into that later on, because that becomes more prominent later on in the season. But yeah, I think what else is happening in this episode? This is the episode where Diane, I'm reading the description, where Diane like gets high at the party.
Right. Right.
Okay. So how'd you all meet Shit Show?
We went to a TED Talk. He just silently nods, having said not a single word throughout the episode.
But yeah, it's actually interesting because it's like, so like the guy obviously meant to text a different Diane, but texted her instead to invite her to the party. But once she's there, he actually kind of is like, yeah, stay and hang out. And she's like, but like, I'm the nerd, you're the cool guys, or whatever. He's just kind of like, come on, this isn't high school anymore. Like, we're adults, you know? You got to move on from the weird high school dynamics that don't actually mean anything, right? Because, you know, in high school, there's always this like, oh, here's the cool kids, here's the nerds, you know, you're in your social circle, but in reality, we're all just people, and
you
gotta kind of move past that. And it's interesting that she still hasn't moved past that, thinking of herself as in that dynamic, even though she's like in her 30s now, I believe. It's kind of like a thing that's always stuck with her because she was always just the nerd in high school and stuff, you know?
Well, yeah, that's probably like a trend, right? That like the nerds and, you know, the weirdos and all those sections of school, like that stuff sticks with them longer. Because, like, you know, the cool guys and girls and, you know, the jocks and stuff, they don't, in a very general and the stereotypical sense of all these sections and groups, they don't have like, they're not ostracized and attacked like some of the nerds and other groups are, at least traditionally in this stereotypical scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, obviously it would have a more of an impact on them.
Yeah. It is interesting, though. Yeah. So that's sort of an interesting little thing that's brought up in her side story.
Right. And then,
I also loved the whole drug thing.
Oh, yeah. The drugs are telling me that this is a good idea, so it's a good idea. But she's like carrying Mr. Peanut Butter to bed, and then they fall and she breaks her arm.
Drugs. I thought you were my friend. But then there's that moment where she's like, so like this, I think, is the one where at the beginning they were like talking to their therapist, and the therapist was like, Diane, you need to be able to be more open about your feelings. Because like Mr. Peanut Butter is fully open about his feelings and talking and whatever. And and then she does that while she's high. At the end, she's like, oh, I really feel this way. And he's like, there you go. So but she's like, yeah, but like, that's just me on drugs. And she's like, but like, normally I'm so mean. Why am I so mean? And he's like, you're not mean. And it's like, it's kind of like a sad little moment. Like, and that it kind of shows that she has some levels of self-loathing as well. You know, Bojack isn't the only one who has that sort of depression thing, you know.
Yeah, there's all sort of representation of all sorts of you know, emotional drama and hardship in this show. Because, you know, Bojack's the most obvious, but then there's Todd with his, you know, struggling to understand exactly what he is with, you know, that's going on in this season. And there's Diane with her, you know, why am I so mean to people? Why, you know, why did I quit doing what I did with, you know, trying to help people and, you know, stop, you know, I cannot talk today. Wow. You know, stop people from doing bad things with like the hippo man.
Hank Hippopopoulos.
Yeah, that one. With the unsaid thing that he does to all of his secretaries.
Yeah, she's sort of like, I just kind of settled for this thing where I just tweet for celebrities, you know?
Right. And then there's finally like Princess Carolyn with her workaholic nature, constantly struggling to you know, keep her business going, but also really wants to settle down and have a family, but can't seem to bring herself to do it.
Which that's actually interesting because this is also the episode where Princess Carolyn goes on the 3 dates.
Right, and
because
first two are robust.
Yeah, because she's talking to Judah, her assistant, who's like probably the best assistant in the freaking world.
Yeah.
He's really good at his job.
He's just efficiency.
Yeah. And yeah, I love Judah. He's a fun character. He's a cool guy. He's also does not understand sarcasm or jokes at all.
Can you get me 3 dates tonight? Okay.
He's like, oh, you actually got me 3 dates tonight. But like, yeah, because there's this whole thing where he's like, well, he's like, do you want me to cancel it? He's like, are you sure you want to cancel the dates? I mean, this is the first night off you'll have in like a long time. This might be the first. You might not have a night off.
One you'll have in a long time. Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. So that again adds to the whole workaholic thing, which it makes sense in a way because she did just start a business. So like, it's kind of like, when you're starting a business yourself, you got to put a lot of work in to get it going.
But she's always been like that, even before starting that business.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's sort of her thing is, and it's because her thing is that. And also like, she's always wanted to get married, start a family and stuff like that. But
those two desires don't mix.
But she's also this workaholic, so she doesn't have time for that. And you actually see that in like one of her dates. She's the one date she's with the albino rhino gyno. Because he's a gynecologist, obviously, and he's like, oh well, at your age, you probably won't have kids. And she's just like, it's kind of that realization where she's like, yeah, I probably waited too long, if I wanted to start a family.
I did really like the exchange of, who made you an expert on my fertility? Well, I'm a gynecologist specializing in fertility. Like, oh, I guess you kind of are an expert then.
You're the only, it's like, I'm the only albino gyno rhino I know. Well, yeah, because it was him, and then the first date she went on was like this really boring guy who's just like, what business was he in again?
The industrial glass pane business, automotive. Yeah, it was something with windows on cars.
Yeah, and he's like,
automobile.
Are you in? He's like, oh, are you in? She's like, are you in the industry? And she's like, yeah, and she says, I'm an agent. And she's like, oh, you're in the entertainment industry. Yeah, I was referring to the auto glass industry. We just call it the industry.
Because we think we're better than everybody else.
Yeah, because we think we're better than everybody. But yeah, and then
the mouse man.
Her third date.
I liked him because he was like, may all your disasters be this easy to avoid. And then it was a great disaster.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like their first thought is like, oh, you're a cat, I'm a mouse, this is weird, okay. But they start making jokes about it, and then they connect really well because of it. And he's like, oh, when's your next night off? And she's like, well, I don't know. So he gives her his number, and so yeah, that's so I really like how they set that up, that it's like this weird, like a cat and a mouse together, because yeah. But yeah, we can move on to the next episode if you'd like.
Sure.
That's episode 5. So this podcast is probably going to be at least 2 hours.
Wonders.
So this episode gets wild. Brap pew pew.
Oh, right.
Oh
because
my gosh.
The end.
Oh yeah, of the last episode, yeah.
They find out that Diane is pregnant. And it was either end of last episode or beginning of this episode that they do the thing where they both say what they want at the same time, Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter.
Yeah, it's at the opening of this episode. Because the end of last episode ends with her going, mother f... And then the beginning of this episode is Ucker.
Right.
So the whole, like, they don't only say the F word once. Technically, this doesn't count
because it's split in between 2 episodes.
It's split up. I really like that. It just ends with next episode begins with ucker.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they both say at the same time, and she says abortion, and Mr. Peanut Butter says get an abortion, and Mr. Peanut Butter's like, oh no, we said 2 different things, which is such a Mr. Peanut Butter thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is interesting because it sort of brings up the abortion issue. The show, it does occasionally bring up like things like this, like kind of political, social issues that are facing our country. So
right.
I don't know how much I want to talk about that issue necessarily on the podcast. But personally, I don't know. It's just like touchy subject. But so yeah, so they're going to, but we can talk about the plot at least. So they're going to she has this issue, so she tweets for celebrities, obviously that's like her thing,
right?
So she
accidentally tweets that she's getting an abortion from Sextina
Aquafina. Yeah, and it's funny because she did that with Bojack too, where she like accidentally tweeted like what she was saying or whatever, I think. Or no, she like tripped on the floor and it accidentally posted a picture of the bathroom floor and said Spudjib. And then Mr. Peanut Butter Cup said, oh, I saw your latest tweet, Bojack. Spudjib. Classic Bojack. But yeah, so they, they think Sextina Aquafina, she accidentally tweets for Sextina saying she's getting an abortion. It's this big issue. But then they realize a lot of people are like, in favor. A lot of people like it because they're like, oh my gosh, you're coming out, like telling everybody this, like, it's very stigmatized and you're telling people, and, so she's like, so they're like, oh yeah, let's market this as like, she's like a big, person in the pro-choice movement and all that kind of stuff. And then she does that song, which just is so just, I don't even want to talk about it.
I mean, they make a at least half decent point of like, joking about it makes it less scary.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Rap, pew, pew. I'm a baby killer. Baby killing makes me horny.
Just no. It's
shoot that fetus. Kill that fetus.
No, stop. No.
It's so weird.
It's such like ham-fisted, heavy, like hitting. Like you dare to put this on a show that's like out there?
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, Diane doesn't quite like it, obviously.
Understandably.
So yeah, and then they come up with a plan. They're gonna fake that she's having an abortion, and she decides to do like a live thing of it and whatever.
Live in quotation marks.
Yeah. We'll just put the word live in the corner. We'll pre-record it. Put the word live in the corner. It's fine.
Who did they say was gonna play the fetus?
I don't remember, but they're like making a whole production of it. Like it's so weird. I don't remember what else happens in this
Honestly,
episode.
this entire episode is at least like emotionally dominated in my mind by that one issue.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a separate story happening with Bojack in this episode. I just read the description. So this is the one where Bojack is like the one with George Clooney's.
George Clooners.
So I find it so weird that they decide to change the names of these actors. So like George Clooners is obviously supposed to be George Clooney. Brad Pitt is obviously Brad Pitt, and there's like Leonardo DiCaprio or whatever is obviously Leonardo DiCaprio, and it's like
why are you starting to change these names now?
They've never done it before. Like they've used real actors' names before. You know, you had Daniel Radcliffe, you had Andrew Garfield, and like and Jessica Biel. You know, like why are you changing these actors' names for the show? I just think they just thought it was funny. I don't know. Like
they really should have done. What is his name? Cucumber Batch.
Oh yeah.
That guy who's like, as long as you say like vaguely the syllables, you can immediately tell who he is. You know that meme?
Yeah, the messing up Benedict Cumberbatch's name.
Benedict Cumberbatch, right.
Yeah. Yep. That would have been a good one to do, but no, they didn't. But also, I love the name of the movie that George Clooners is like being nominated for. It's The Nazi Who Played Yahtzee. Yeah.
Is that a reference to something?
It's like I want to know what The Nazi Who Played Yahtzee is about. Like, is it just a long game of Yahtzee? And that's the entire movie of Nazis playing Yahtzee together? Or like, what is it, you know?
Ooh, hello. Shower thought. What is the plot to the movie The Nazi Who Played Yahtzee? Is it a comedy, romance, murder, mystery? Is there a love story in it?
Yeah.
A memorial film about a young boy who waited starving and cold for his Nazi father to return from war so that they could play their favorite game, Yahtzee. Is like the most upvoted answer.
I guess we'll never know the true answer.
Yeah.
They just wanted to come up with a ridiculous name for a movie title.
Certainly ridiculous.
But yeah, so in this episode, Bojack he's annoyed at George Clooney or George Clooners because he won the whatever award they won. I forget which one, because they win like they go through multiple different awards, and then obviously the Oscar is the big one,
right?
And he's like, I guess George Clooners is a big prank person. Is George Clooney a big prank lover in real life? I don't know if that's...
I have no idea.
If that's a thing or if that's just some... I've never heard of that, so maybe I think it's just something they made up for George. George Clooners. So he wants to like get back at him with a prank, and he finds out that Anna Spanakopita is also his publicist, and he gets mad at her because he's like, you're the publicist for multiple people, and
he makes a very good point that it's not that you're good at your job at getting people Oscars, it's that you just represent everybody who has a chance of getting an Oscar.
Yeah, he's like no wonder you've 9 out of 10 of your clients have won Oscars. You know, 9 out of 10 of the years you've had a client who wins an Oscar. Yeah. But yeah, and he like fires her. But then there's the scene at the end where she comes to like shows up at his house to be like
in like the dark, smoking on a big chair, like all dramatic.
To tell him like I fired all or I quit with all my other clients, so now you are my only client, because I want to show the world that I can make somebody like you win the Oscar. I am the best.
And then it gets weird.
Yeah. So she like reaches down and starts like, I mean, you don't see what she's doing, but I don't think you need to see it to know what she's doing.
Yep.
And then she's like grabs and like causes pain, and don't you ever screw me again. And it's just
that's a very odd moment. Because like the idea is that she liked when he got in charge and fired her like that, but also she's still like forcibly controlling him like that. It's very weird.
Yeah, it sort of starts their very weird relationship that they have moving forward. Because before this, their relationship was pretty much professional, but now it sort of becomes like they have this weird thing going on.
Right.
So yeah, interesting. Which next episode, as long as you're ready to move on, is titled "Stop the Presses." So, okay, so yeah, this is the one where, this is the one where Bojack gets a call from the news, or he calls the newspaper trying to cancel his subscription to, what is it? Is it the New Yorker or something? Whatever newspaper he's subscribed to that he wants to cancel.
Something like that, yeah.
And
with the closer.
Yeah, the closer.
Who just really acts as a therapist for him the entire episode.
But her whole goal is literally just to keep him subscribed to the magazine, though, or to the newspaper. But she convinces him to through basically playing a therapist, Yeah. He goes through this whole story, all these stories, and she's trying to figure out the real meaning of everything, and he tells her about the relationship he has with Anna, and she thinks that's weird, and she's like,
this is where we learn about Emma.
Oh yeah, this is where we learn about how he had sex with Emily, and how that makes things weird, because like Emily and Todd are running a business from his house, and but there's actually that one scene, I think it's in this episode, where she it might be this episode, or maybe it was the next one, I don't know, where I think it's this one where Emily leaves like the business, and she's like, yeah, I want you to run it, it's just weird, and she doesn't tell him fully why, but it's kind of a sad moment because Todd really wants her to be there, and
and she just kind of says that, like, I haven't been the best friend to you, and neither has Bojack. And so, like, Todd just has this vague idea that something happened, but he doesn't know what.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of... Yeah, it's kind of like a sad moment, because it's just like she's leaving, and, Todd's such a nice guy, such a just sweet, innocent person in all this, and it's just you kind of feel bad. But yeah, their idea for their business is pretty cool, though. I like the business idea.
It gets off the rails pretty fast, but yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean, once you have Mr. Peanut Butter and Todd in charge of a business, it's kind of, I think it's like once Emily left, the business goes off the rails and goes away from what it was originally supposed to be. But
because Emily was like the only one that had any sort of grounding.
Yeah, exactly.
She was like the cleric.
Yeah.
In the party, the only one that could make a reasonable decision.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I'm trying to remember a lot of the details of this episode, because like it's all played through the perspective of Bojack telling this person the story. Like that's the main episode. But I know that there are like other things going on here.
We can mention that the way that they tell the story like that, how it's just stories from Bojack with this therapist-esque character, really she like analyzes and breaks him down in a way that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
If the episode had played in a normal way, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very unique perspective that allows us to see not only Bojack's perspective of everything,
right,
but also the person who's analyzing him and knows what's going on in his head.
Yeah, because you have moments where he's like, yeah, and then it's because I had sex with Emily, and she's like, you what? she's like, do you think you did that out of this? Do you think you did that for this reason and that? I forget all the details, but it was like she's like trying to analyze all this stuff, and then he says that he's having sex with Anna too, and he's just like, what? You're having sex with her too? Like, she's just like, what is wrong with you? You're having sex with your publicist too? Yeah. So I don't remember enough of the episode to say much more, but I think this is the one with like, oh wait, yeah, this is the one where he finds out Margot Martindale is in his boat.
Right.
And then
she leaves onto the high seas.
Oh, what a character. She's because she's like continuing her career while also being on the run. She's like, yeah, I also had a run on whatever show, and he's like, I thought you were trying to keep a low profile. And she's
it's called getting into the role. Acting, you should try it sometime.
Oh, yeah. She just roasts him for not being a good actor compared to her. I love it. Yeah. And yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's like the Todd head, paper mache head in this episode and stuff. And she takes it with her on the ship when she leaves on the boat. But yeah, we can move on to the next episode if you'd like, because I don't, unless you have any specific thing to say.
No, I think I'm good. It's a very odd episode.
I mean, at the end, the person does convince him to keep his subscription to the newspaper, so she succeeds.
Yeah.
The closer is very good at closing. Closing deals, yeah. The next episode is titled, this is episode 8, so we're getting close. 4 left. Or no, wait.
5.
5 left. Yeah, 5 left.
We need to count the one that we haven't done yet.
Yeah, Old Acquaintance is episode 8. So this is the one where Princess Carolyn is trying to get Bojack in like the one movie. They said David Fincher's latest film. It's like
this is the one where they keep flipping back and forth between Rutabaga and Princess Carolyn, trying to get people those 2 movies.
Yeah. Which I love how the director of it is David Fincher, so it's like David Fincher in real life, the real life director. David Fincher is the one who directed Fight Club. So that's cool. But yeah, and then so that whole thing's going on, and it like, because of this constant back and forth, all the different projects fall through. Well, because this is also the one where the guy who was the kid on Horsing Around wants to do Ethan Around,
right?
And then like Anna just Bojack doesn't want to say no to him,
and Anna just rips into him and like tells him off. Yeah. Which, poor guy. Yeah, and then he trips and falls and like, oh no, my whatever it is, my phone fell in a bog.
Well, yeah, because he has to like cancel his down payment before midnight or whatever, because it's like New Year's, because he's like that he had on his house in LA or whatever. Because it's like a really expensive, like $1 million, which, you probably shouldn't go all in like that until you know for sure that the show's happening and is going to be successful and stuff. But, whatever. It's that's whatever.
He's a weird character.
He is.
Like, they don't make him get angry over really anything, even though there's a ton of stuff that should make him angry and upset.
Yeah. I mean, Bojack did have sex with his mom back in the day.
That's one of those things, yeah.
Let's see. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, because that's sort of like one of the main things. Oh, and also in this episode, he wants to do a movie with Kelsey Jennings.
Right.
Again. And which actually would be nice, because that would be like a good way to like repair their relationship with each other. It would be great. And it's like a more indie movie where she has more control, so they wouldn't have the issue that they had before. with her having a chance of getting fired from it the way she did before and stuff. So it would be a great thing.
She mentions Todd again, that little guy with his face, little scamp getting in trouble.
Tell him I said hi. How's your friend with the face?
I love that dynamic so much because it's just such a like throwaway joke.
Yeah. But I feel so bad at the end though, because like, so that falls through because like Princess Carolyn was constantly trying to do this back and forth with upping the costs of things or the prices, and she couldn't pay, and like then the time was too late, and so he couldn't be fired for it because Princess Carolyn's trying to balance that and the other movie they're trying to get, and it's like this whole thing. And she's like, oh, why did I get my hopes up? Why do I always let you get my hopes up with these things? And she's like, and it's like, it just feels so bad because it's like, you know, the last time he got her fired, now this, and it's like, because like if they, you know, they seem to have a very similar view on like artisticness in movies and stuff, and like how to like make a good movie and stuff. And so they seem like they would work really well as a team in a movie, you know, him being a lead actor in something she's producing, but it's just something went wrong both times. You know, the other time they had, obviously the studio didn't want them to do what they wanted to do and led to her getting fired. And now it's like this whole thing, you know, it's like the agent getting involved too much, trying to, instead of just letting him do it the way he wanted to. And then it falls through, and it's kind of like, you know, like if they actually were able to really work together on a project, it would probably go really well, you know, because they have very similar views on a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah, it
so
makes the end where it all falls through that much more, you know, impactful and hurtful.
Yeah.
I do like the whole dynamic where Rutabaga and the old rival agent of Princess Carolyn,
Vanessa Gecko.
Together. Yeah, Vanessa Gecko. They're working together to, you know, get these two movies like against Princess Carolyn. So, you know, it's constantly flipping back and forth the entire time. But they have like, you know, they're always in a dark room with the blinds closed, and they have all these things on a corkboard pinned up. They're like all these like stupid little, to show that they're the bad guys, right? Like those vague references to movies that always happen for the bad guys.
Yeah.
But at the beginning they say, we'll get it because, you know, we're the good guys. But clearly they're not. They're not the main characters of the show. Princess Carolyn is, you know, closer to the main character.
Yeah.
But the show flips it on its head, and, you know, they get everything they want, and Princess Carolyn and Bojack don't.
Well, because at the end, they're like, they say, they're like, we just had such a happy ending, you know. His wife who's done having babies, and I say babies because, you know, they're rabbits, so they have multiple babies at once. His wife's done having babies, and he's like, oh, this is so great. You know, he fixed his relationship with his wife, and he's like, good thing. It's like, and we got our guy, like the job or whatever. They're like, oh, looks like everyone's happy, even though, you know, everybody else, the actual main characters aren't, you know.
Yeah, this show does that a lot, and it does it very good. The idea that, you know, you mentioned this before, not everything is just solved and ends by the end of an episode, and the good guys don't always get the happy ending. You know, it flips those like weird little tropes on their head.
Yeah, the show does a really good job at a lot of that kind of thing. But yeah, also, so another thing that's happening in this episode is, this is the one where Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter go to see his brother.
Right.
And
he's kind of intense at times.
But only when it's with Diane. Like every time Mr. Peanut Butter leaves the room and it's just him and Diane, he's like says something really like deep, but like also depressing, like about how everyone's gonna die one day. It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, you have really cute little cute kids or whatever, and he's like, yeah, one day they'll die just like us. You're just like, what?
All life is precious. And it cuts to a picture of him and Mr. Peanut Butter, like holding a swordfish man, because they're all people like that they just caught on a boat.
That's so weird. So weird. Yeah. But yeah, it turns out his brother is sick. It's like I don't know, what is it, like a ruptured spleen or something?
Twisted spleen.
It's twisted spleen. And he goes through a surgery to remove his spleen. I don't know if that's like a normal thing you do. I don't know.
It's a dog thing. My Great Dane had a few years ago. Well, more than a few years ago. She had twisted intestines. So, it's common problems in dogs.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't sure because I was like, I'm guessing this is like probably a normal like dog type of surgery.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
I do also love the moment where Bojack calls them from New York, and it's like 4 a.m. where they are in the Labrador Peninsula. So Diane picks up the phone, but Mr. Peanut Butter hears it while he's asleep, and he goes, "Is that Bojack Horseman? What is this, a crossover episode? Like fully asleep?"
This is a crossover episode. Oh my gosh. It is actually interesting, though, to see sort of where Mr. Peanut Butter came from. Because, like, so, like, Bojack and Diane, you saw they had really kind of terrible childhoods and family lives and stuff. But it's like Mr. Peanut Butter had, like, this, like, amazing, perfect upbringing. Everybody's happy. And, like, it's like... It's kind of like you're like, oh, you kind of see why he is the way he is. Because, like, he had, a perfect, loving family, no issues whatsoever, living in this, like, perfect paradise, essentially. And it's like...
Well, they're all dogs. And they all have that, like, golden retriever, golden lab personality of just happy all the time. And so, of course, that society that they built around that would be ultra positive and nice.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting because, like, we were talking before about how, like, Bojack Horseman and Mr. Peanut Butter are sort of an interesting parallel to each other because they were both, like, on a famous sitcom in the 90s and whatever. But, like, they both have a different outlook on life, where it's like Mr. Peanut Butter is always positive, Bojack's always negative, and you kind of see, you're like, in a way, the reason why they're they have those different outlooks on life, a lot of it has to do with their upbringing, because Bojack had such a terrible negative childhood, parents who put him down all the time and made him feel like he was terrible, which is why he has all those self-loathing issues, because it's just deep-seated in him from his parents.
Yeah, he
constantly
was
taught to think he's terrible by his parents, whereas you can contrast that with Mr. Peanut Butter. Mr. Peanut Butter's positive all the time because that's the way he was raised. He was raised in a really good positive environment where his parents really loved him and
Right. Nothing bad ever happens on the Labrador Peninsula.
Yeah. And so you kind of see there's that contrast, and there's, and that's why even like Diane, for instance, has some depression issues too. And what's her background?
She gets into that with Mr. Peanut Butter, doesn't she?
Yeah.
That, like, the difference in their upbringings, like, causes this, like, this difference in
exactly
personality.
Exactly. And it is. I like that they sort of get into like what Mr. Peanut Butter's upbringing was like, because I think it adds another layer to it where it's like you see kind of, because I mean, realistically, not to say that like your childhood has to define you, but like it does. How you were, raised, it does have a huge part of like who you are when you grow up. It does really help shape, those are the early stages of your life where you're...
Those are your formative years.
Right.
So, of course, you're going to take in every bit of information you can and
exactly. So
if you're... learn from it.
If during your formative years, you're constantly hearing from your parents that you're a worthless piece of garbage and that you ruined their lives, you're going to internalize that, but if you're constantly getting love and affection and your parents really care about you, you're going to internalize that. It depends on. So yeah, it is interesting to see how like that affects.
Right.
But yeah, we can move on if you want. I feel like we're getting pretty late in the podcast, so it's probably a good idea to move on. But
yeah, definitely.
We are having a lot of really good discussions, though, so that's good. The next episode 9, is Best Thing That Ever Happened, is the title. So this is the one where Princess Carolyn and Bojack Horseman are at Elefante, the restaurant, and he like tries to he like fires her.
Right.
So, and that's the whole episode, is what's going on with that. So,
well, because there's this whole conversation, and it's it just kind of goes downhill until he finally goes and fires her. But the stereotypical Italian man,
it's difficult to come. Stereotypes like me are difficult to come by these days.
Yeah, he thinks that he fires him. So then the entire restaurant gets up and leaves because, I guess they're with him in some capacity. And so it's just the Chihuahua, like chauffeur, parking space man, and the waiter.
Yeah.
So then he actually fires Princess Carolyn, and it's just this whole thing of the restaurant going downhill while there's the worm...
food critic.
Yeah, food critic, that's the word. Just waiting for her food.
Yeah, so this episode, it's like, so there's that whole thing going on, but it's all sort of, as far as the importance to the like character and story, this is a really good like deep study of Bojack and Princess Carolyn's relationship as characters.
Yeah.
This is the one where like he says like, oh, that was I don't remember the first time we met, and she's like, that actually wasn't, and they go in that, and you sort of like this episode does a great job of just studying sort of like their the relationship they've had for many years, because like throughout the show you kind of know that they have like a history together and that they've known each other for a long time, and she works, she's his agent, but you never get like as much into it as they do here. This is where you really start to like see and it's really interesting. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say like a lot of details because it's just the whole thing is just a lot of really interesting stuff there. Right. And like there's like really poignant moments, like that moment where he finally says, he's like, I do love you, by the way, or at least as much as I'm capable of loving anyone.
Yeah.
And it's like he doesn't allow himself to love people in a way. He tries not to, because like he knows like if you love someone, you would just end up hurting them, or they end up hurting you. And he's like, so what's the point? And
but like they have like a interesting exchange in the freezer, because like she goes off and like says, like tries to say 10 good things about him, right? And he denies them like the entire time.
Well, every time she says one of the positive things, he turns it into a negative. So,
which reflects his own self-loathing in that aspect.
Yeah, that positive things are somehow turned negative for him. Yeah. And then there's him. He mentions that if you're good at putting out fires, you just go and put out any fires that you see.
And,
Yeah.
that's immediately turned literal when the freezer door opens and everything's on fire. And she's like, I can't stay and talk here. I need to put out that fire.
Yeah. Well, it's also it's an interesting study of Princess Carolyn's character as well, because like she has this need to like fix everyone's problems,
Right.
which is one reason why she's so drawn to Bojack, I think, because she wants to like try to help fix him and help him,
Yeah. If you like repairing stuff, then a junkyard is the place to be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because like Bojack tells her, he's like, why don't you just leave? And she's like, fine. She leaves, but like, she just has to go back, There's that song playing on the radio.
Don't go back to that restaurant, Princess Carolyn.
Oh, who do they write these songs for?
Don't turn that car around. And she turns off the radio. God damn it.
Turns around and has to help. And she's just like that character who's like good at everything, like she just knows how to cook this meal really well.
She's good at everything except like finding time for everything.
Yeah. She's good at doing things she's good at helping everybody else, but not helping herself.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at with that exchange, because...
Yeah, exactly.
He analyzes her and says, this is your problem. You're helping others too much. But she kind of sees it as, like, she has to help others, or, like, helping others is her way of helping herself.
Mm-hmm.
While he's, can't take a compliment and just is self-loathing and doesn't think he can do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is a really good study of these two characters' relationships, like a relationship with each other. It's a really strong episode. And then in the end, he still won't hire her back, though. It's like,
Right. I do. It was interesting because, like, I think she just asked, like, basically one more time, like, so will you, rehire me? And he's about to answer. They get distracted by the waiter coming back
to get his coat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he leaves. And he finally answers and just goes, no. And it cuts right then and there abruptly.
Yeah. And you're just kind of like, shit. Because, like, the whole thing is, like, a lot of times in, like, TV shows, there's always, like, certain character dynamics. Like, in this TV show, it's like, okay, Princess Carolyn is Bojack's agent. That's just her role in the show. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but this show isn't afraid to sort of change roles. Like, she's not, like, I don't think she's, if I remember, I could be wrong, but I don't know if she's his agent again in the show. I could be wrong.
Into a manager, right?
Well, yeah. I think she might end up actually managing. I don't remember I'll have to remember as we go, but.
Right.
So it's sort of like the show isn't afraid to sort of change relationships and sort of change the status quo, because there's it's not like a sitcom where you have the same status quo. Every episode is, has to go back to the normal thing. It's sort of everything continues and progresses like real life does, where things change, relationship dynamics change, it's, which, because it's, obviously that reflects more what real life is like. So yeah, it's not afraid to like have him fire her from being his agent, because, so far that's like the main reason her character is in the show, because she's the main character's agent.
Most shows would, always stick to that. Because, that's their formula. That's how everything was set up, and changing that, ruins that. But they go, well, who cares? We'll just change it.
Yeah, I mean, things like that would happen in real life, so why wouldn't it happen in the show,
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of the show. We can move on to the next episode if you'd like.
Yeah.
Unless you have anything to say about that. So the next one is It's You, is the title of the episode.
Right. This is the F-bomb.
Oh, yeah, it is at the end. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Not 11, but 10 this time.
We'll get to that because that's the end. So this is the one where, at the beginning, it opens with Mr. Peanut Butter announcing the Oscars, or the Oscar nominations, not the Oscars, but the nominations. And he mentions that Bojack is nominated. And, Anna, she says, "How does it feel that you've just been nominated for an Oscar?" And he's like, I feel the same.
Yeah. There's this whole build up where he stands up and he has his arms up and he goes, I feel the same.
And he's like, wait.
It's just such a big letdown.
Because he's like, wait, this won't make me happy? What? Nothing's going to make me happy. He has this, constant thing where he's thinks the next big thing will make him happy, and then it doesn't. And then he's just like, what? He doesn't know where to find true happiness, kind of is, yeah. So... She talks him out of that negative feeling a little bit. She's like, no, it's okay. This is going to be great and whatever. And he's like, yeah. So then he decides to have a big party to celebrate. And the party scenes is really interesting. So he's just going wild partying and stuff. And then Diane shows up. And then he has a conversation with Diane, and that's a really interesting one. They kind of have almost a little fight kind of thing where she's like, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, because it was he goes,
well, he's accusing her of I guess being a hypocrite because she's not doing that important social justice warrior work anymore. She's just tweeting for celebrities. I hate my mouth today. I cannot talk.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and because she's criticizing him, but this isn't you, and he's like, oh my gosh. She's like, yeah, and she's like, and they have this whole fight where she's like, yeah, but what's gonna happen is this isn't gonna make you happy, and you're gonna go into this spiral, and she's like, and maybe you won't have any friends around. And he's like, yeah, I will have friends around when I commit suicide, because look at all these people, but yeah, it's an interesting little thing. And then
finally Mr. Peanut Butter shows up, saves them from drowning.
Well, yeah,
and goes,
yeah,
you're not actually nominated.
Yeah, which I think it's interesting. So the tonal shift. So he's partying, having fun. Diane comes. He has a conversation with Diane. Then suddenly this tone shifts where he's still, the same party music is happening. The party's happening around him, but he's not with it anymore. He's just kind of, because you see there's all those shots of him moving around the party, and it's just right on him. And it's just kind of similar to the framing of the shot of the intro to the show, the opening, where it's constantly his face moving around everywhere. But it's with this party going on in the background, he's just kind of he's no longer in the party. He's kind of distant away from it. And then he gets in his Tesla
and falls in the pool
and drives backwards.
Yeah.
And in basically a suicide attempt. It's one of those where it's kind of a suicide attempt, but it's also one where he
kind of happened. And
yeah,
he was drowning, but he clearly just sort of let himself drown in that moment.
So I always like this scene because it's almost a direct it's almost like a recreation of the opening of the show, the intro, because you see that it's the shot is framed the same way, where it's just his face in the center of the shot, and then everything happening around him, except instead of him just falling over the edge into the pool, it's in a car. But still, it's that same sort of shot framing. I think it's done specifically to make you think of that, I think. But yeah, so that's like always an interesting moment to me.
Yeah, then Mr. Peanut Butter saves him and says, "You're not actually nominated," and everyone immediately starts leaving.
Yeah. Well, before she says that, though, it then goes to the backstory of what really happened and the whole...
Right. How Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter
had to fake the Oscar nominations because they didn't...
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then there's like the whole scene where he's like chasing his phone and it's playing the Mr. Peanut Butter's house theme song. Who's that dog? Mr. Peanut Butter.
Give a duck a bone.
He's a dirty dog. He's just trying to do his job. Who's that dog? Mr. Peanut Butter. Knick knack paddywhack, give the dog a bone. That's like his ringtone too.
Oh, it is?
I think so. Yeah. Well, because that's the theme song for his TV show he was in.
Right.
Mr. Peanut Butter's house. And then, but yeah, so then it goes through that whole story, and I think the scene where they're like coming up with what to put in the Oscars is kind of funny too. Like, oh, let's put Avatar on there. That's a good movie. Did that come out this year? I don't know. I feel like I just saw it. Okay, we'll put it on there. Like, even though it came out in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
or like, wasn't there one thing there was just like, I'm sure this man was in something. Yeah, let's just put him up there.
Well, no, yeah, they did that because it was like, oh yeah, he's always really good. Yeah, he's in something, so let's put him up there. And it's like an actor, I think it was, and they put him under the category of like sound design or something. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then he goes to like do the Oscars, and like everybody is just kind of like, what? And he's like,
no questions, goodbye.
No questions, goodbye. Runs away. But yeah, so he lets Bojack know, and obviously that's like a big issue.
Right.
But then he kind of mentions or alludes to the fact that Todd didn't want him to win, or like didn't want to put his name up there. And he's like, what? But he's like my friend. Why wouldn't he? You know? And so then he goes to talk to Todd about it. And this is like the end kind of moment of the show.
Yeah. He goes
so it's like,
to talk about
so
it,
it's
like,
yeah, because
he
it's
thinks that he knows, right?
Yeah. Because I like the way the way this scene is sort of framed. So it's the next day, and the place is just trashed from the party. There's a hole, the window's broken, and he's just like in the remains of everything that happened the night before. And then Todd has this conversation with him, and it's like, and he finds out that he had sex with Emily, because like he's like, I know something happened, but I didn't know you had sex with her. He says it, whatever. And then this is like a big moment for Todd, because like
he finally goes off on Bojack.
Yeah, because in the show, Todd just kind of lives with Bojack and just kind of goes along with a lot of Bojack's really weird stuff and crazy stuff, shitty things. But Todd's finally like, no, like, you can't just keep saying you're sorry for all the shitty things you did. You are the thing. You're what's wrong with you. You can't just keep doing shitty things. And it's like, he's like, I know, I'm going to try to do better. He's like, no, you can't just keep doing this. He's like, you have to just be better. Like, come on. And he says like he's going to move out and stuff. And it's just, and then comes the F-bomb of the season, where he's just like,
he just go. Well, the entire thing is like he's saying, no, you are what's wrong with you? You can't keep doing this. You need to be better. It's you. And he finally just goes, fuck, man, what else is there to say?
Yeah.
Like he's just finally had it gotten all out, and he's like, yeah, that's what I needed to say.
Yeah, this is there's so many really poignant lines in this season. Like that's one of them. And And again, this is sort of like I was saying in the last episode, the whole idea of like their show's not afraid to change the status quo, right? Because like Todd legitimately never lives with Bojack again in the show. Like he leaves, and he doesn't live with him anymore. Which has been, again, the whole dynamic of that character originally was he's just the guy who lives on Bojack's couch.
Yeah.
And it's like the show's not afraid to sort of change that up and move on from that and kind of show like people moving on from that and changing and relationships changing and growing. And
yeah, it's like the equivalent of Sokka no longer being the boomerang guy.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not afraid to just rip that away from him.
Yeah, exactly. And, this, like we said before, this is the first season where Todd really gets a lot of character development anyways. So, like, this is really obviously makes sense for him to have, like, this sort of moment where, it's intense because, and all of this stuff sort of pushes Bojack to what happens in the next episode, if you want to get to that now, unless you have more to say on that.
No, I think there wasn't any like side stories, was there?
No, I think it was mostly just the Oscar nomination being wrong and all that, and Bojack's party, and all that kind of stuff. So the next episode is episode 11, which is, that's always the big episode, right? Is That's Too Much, Man, which is, obviously was Sarah Lynn's catchphrase on Horsing Around. That's too much, man.
This entire episode is just Bojack and, find Sarah Lynn, and they just go ham. And there's constantly blackouts and jumping through the timeline.
Yeah, he's like, let's go on an epic bender of, drug and alcohol bender. And there's like, this is really intense too, because like he has this whole like, we're gonna make amends thing after they go to the AA meeting where Bojack just completely tells everybody what he did in the end of the last episode, literally saying the name of the person too. He's like, her name is Penny Carson. You can look her up.
I don't care. Which
is, probably he was obviously completely out of it. So, his sober self wouldn't do that. But like, obviously, enough alcohol really just takes away any inhibitions you might have, anything that might stop you from doing something.
Yeah.
It just, it's like a person who's sober has like walls in front of them where they're like, okay, I have these thoughts that aren't going to come out because I have a wall blocking them. But like drinking enough alcohol
filter,
can like take that wall away. So you're just, which is why it's, never recommended to obviously drink when you're sad, you know what I mean? Like, drinking is okay if it's like an occasional social thing to have a little bit of fun or whatever, but like you never do it out of depression or out of sadness or, I mean, that's sort of how, why Bojack's an alcoholic, because whenever he has the depression and stuff, he tries to use that as like a coping mechanism. Which is kind of what this episode's all about is, all this stuff happened and he needs a way to like forget about it.
Yeah. The entire episode has an interesting dynamic where he's constantly blacking out. And so they just like kind of jump to important points in like this unknown length of time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a while because at the end, they're like, closer to the end, they're like, oh, the Oscars are happening now? Even though, like, they just, like, last episode was the nominations, which the amount of time between the Oscar nominations and the Oscars is a little while. I think it might be a month or two. I don't really know exactly how long it is, but And so yeah, and then it goes to this whole thing where he goes to try to make amends with all these people. Like, I think the scene is kind of funny where they're in Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter's house and they're like dressed like them, and Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter are just standing there. And she's like, "So should we do something? Like, hey, you want to sleep it off in their guest room?" They're like, "Run!" And they like, oh yeah, and they go to like Princess Carolyn's apartment. And he's yelling,
"The mouse man."
Yeah. And she's just like, and like leaves. And it's this thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And then I'm trying to.
Okay. I only remember like this one specific cut of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just flashback back to 07 for no apparent reason.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember what the point of that flashback was.
Yeah, so it's like he goes...
But I do remember that there's a ton of meta jokes going this one episode that we did in the Bojack Horseman show, where it just cut around the timeline all willy-nilly and then had a weird flashback right in the middle for no apparent reason. It wasn't received well. Also,
it was probably all the meta jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, people hate meta jokes.
Like just stacking these meta jokes on top of each other.
Yeah, that scene is actually kind of funny. I like that.
I don't remember the point of that flashback, but
I don't remember much about it other than but it's like it's a drug-induced flashback, obviously, So yeah, and then there's this whole thing where he goes to make amends to Anna Spanakopita, and she's like, "You didn't even really do anything to me, but whatever." And then she tries to tell him the story, and he goes back like multiple times to try to get it, and
he keeps, blacking out during it.
Although when you finally get the story, it's actually kind of a sad moment because her story, the whole point of her story is to say like she doesn't want to be in his life anymore because he might just drag her down with him.
Right.
Because she said sometimes if somebody's drowning,
they'll just thrash and you won't be able to help
It's better to leave them because if you go to try to save them, they might drag you down with them. And Bojack just kind of like, what does that have to do with me? What? Even though like it's obvious what it, as not, he's too drunk to understand, I guess, but drunk and high to understand. But to us, it's like to the audience, you kind of see like, oh yeah, that's what she's saying is like, I don't want to be in your life anymore because you're drowning, you're metaphorically drowning. And I don't want you to drag me down with you. And it's kind of hard hitting right there. It's like, shit. Like
I'm trying to remember other moments in this episode besides like that last big moment.
So obviously, the big thing too is he goes to try to make amends with Penny.
Mm-hmm. Which is a terrible idea.
Yeah, well, every time he's not blacked out, he's like, why am I here? Let's leave. And then he blacks out and then he's still there and he's like, we're still following her, Like he's like, here, let me write it down. Let me write, all right. Follow her on this hand and don't on the other hand. So it says don't follow her. And he's like, what? Then later on he's like, why did we keep following her? We just did what the hand said. Follow her, follow donut. Penny. And then donut. It asks for donuts and Sarah Lynn just has donuts. But then there's the moment and then like she sees him and she's like, why are you here? Like, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I was 17 then. And, and he leaves and it's, and then Sarah Lynn has this whole thing. Oh yeah, she was probably actually healed from that, and seeing you again probably opened up the scar again. And it's like you ruined her life all over again, just making Bojack feel terrible.
Yeah. And then finally, they go to the planetarium.
Well, not before that though.
Oh, really?
Before that,
I can't remember anything in this
so
episode because it's all jumbled like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So,
There's
but
nothing
no,
like.
before that, there's a really good moment because there's the moment they're like in some gross hotel somewhere,
Oh, right.
and the Oscars are happening on TV, and Sarah Lynn wins an Oscar because she was nominated for Best Original Song. So like she probably made a song for a movie or whatever. But she's not there to receive it. And like the bear's like, wherever you are, Sarah Lynn, please come home. And it's like kind of sad. And then she has this whole like sad moment where she's like, I don't like who I am. And you can tell like she does all these sort of like she has a level of depression as well. And she does all these drugs and alcohol and all this stuff just to sort of hide that and just get away from her deep sadness.
And Bojack sees this happening. He just tries to cheer her up by taking her to the planetarium.
Because she wanted to go all along. And then so they actually have like a really nice, sweet moment together. And Bojack's like, see, nothing matters. Like, nothing matters. The universe is so big. What we do doesn't matter. And, like all that matters is this amazing moment we're sharing together. Right, Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn? Boom. Episode over.
Yeah.
So it doesn't... And then the next episode opens with the showing that like he's watching on TV or something that she died. I don't think it showed the funeral. Like he mentioned it afterwards, after the funeral. But like he's watching on TV and like there's like a tribute to her on the thing where they're talking about her death and everything. And like the whale news anchor is like, we lost an icon today. Sarah Lynn died last night or whenever, or died at the age of 31, and it's yeah. And this sort of adds to Bojack's thoughts. So like there's a moment in the episode where when he goes to the AA meeting and he's talking to the people and says like, oh, this thing happened with this girl Penny Carson, you can look her up, all that stuff. He's like, and that's just one of many things that are constantly going around in my head all the time. And now this moment is something that's kind of probably added to that list of things that are just constantly going through his head all the time. This, Sarah Lynn's death and how he kind of contributed to it, because he's the one who encouraged her to do it. And I mean, realistically,
mention in this episode at some point, I believe, that like he thinks it's his fault because he is the one that started that whole bending.
Well, yeah. Also, like, I'm assuming that what really finalized killing her is probably the heroin, right? The Bojack heroin. Yeah.
I didn't think that part, but yeah, probably.
Because remember that he has that line, she's like, let's try it. And he's like, the old saying, liquor before beer, whatever, like something that's an actual saying. Then he just goes, don't do heroin, which, probably a good idea to never do heroin,
Yeah.
That's like the drug that kills more people than any others, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, they do it and yeah, they go to the planetarium and well, yeah. So he feels very responsible for her death and it's also kind of sad because she had that whole thing about how she doesn't like herself and you kind of want the character to maybe do better, but then she dies and she doesn't have a chance to sort of do anything to fix her life.
They give you a problem, and in any other show, the goal would be to fix that problem. But this one, they never get the chance to. They just, end it right then and there.
Yeah. So like this show does a lot of sort of so obviously one of the big themes of the show is Bojack's depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the show does a lot of times where they bring up other characters who are also dealing with depression and sort of show different sort of outcomes to kind of compare it to Bojack, you know. One of them is this, where it could just, you know, never get solved and leads to, you know, overdosing on drugs, dying.
Mm-hmm.
There's like, you know, like Cuddly Whiskers solved his depression by finding out what really made him happy, leaving everything behind. You know, like you kind of see different other perspectives from other people too. It's not just him. Like obviously his is the main focus,
Right.
but you kind of see these other characters going through stuff too.
They use these other characters and their similar scenarios and how they did it as a comparative to, you know, give further insight to his own situation.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it's interesting because it's like, and then in this episode, closer to the end, they do the they actually go to start doing Ethan around. And, you know, he's actually having fun with it. He's talking to the Ethan character and they're coming up with this joke and they're like, yeah, this is going to be great. And they start, you know, they're filming and they have to like take a little break and he's talking to the girl and he's just like, yeah. And he's actually genuinely really nice and sweet. And he's like, yeah, you know something about your parents? They're really proud of you. And he's like, oh, I know. It's like a cute moment. But then there's that one line that she says and he's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? She's like, I want to be like you. And that's a trigger because he's thinking of Sarah Lynn and how, you know, back in the day, like he was the father on a show when she was a little girl. She grew up and, you know, what it led to with her. And he's like, and he says like, I can't do this again. And like, he doesn't want to like, it's because he kind of has this idea in his head that he's poison to everyone around him and that, you know, him being poisoned to Sarah Lynn as a child is what led to, you know, the way she was. And he doesn't want to do that to somebody else.
And it's made me even more impactful by the before of, you know, Ethan round going really well. Like, you know, he's talking to Ethan and, you know, asking, you know, why are you giving me the cutaway to commercial line? It's your show. Why don't you do it? Yeah. And he helps prepare him for that. And he set up this
it's kind of like
minor but important dynamic between the whole two characters there.
Yeah.
Everything's going well. And he's back to doing what he was good at, what was in Horsing Around.
Yeah, and it's famous. And it's this thing where it's like, if he had stayed and continued working on that show, maybe that could bring back some level of happiness because he'd be having fun with it. And he's, you know, he's learned a lot in his experience, so he probably wouldn't, you know, cause a lot of issues with the kids that he's working with on the show. Like he seemed actually genuinely nice and sweet with the kid, you know. But there's still that part of his brain where he thinks that he can't do good, you know, despite now he probably could because of all the stuff he's gone through and everything he's learned. He could be better this time around than he was last time around, but he still doesn't think he can, despite that. So it's kind of, yeah. So yeah, Bojack leaves and so he's driving down like the highway or whatever, like, or driving down a road and
oh right, I forgot this scene.
He like lets, you know, he closes his eyes, takes his hands off the wheel,
gas pedal on the floor, going, you know, upwards of 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, but he, you know, can't do it. He ends up stopping himself, which, yeah, is interesting because, I mean, I think a lot of times in real life, you know, like if there are suicidal attempts that aren't successful because the person stops themselves, right? Where it's like nobody, like a lot of times when people are like suicidal, they're not fully into the idea of killing themselves. It's just kind of like a thing they think sometimes, but then it kind of shifts. So it's kind of that moment where he just kind of is like, nope, I can't do it, you know? But then he has that moment at the very end where he just sees
all the horses running in the desert.
And it's like gives him some sort of weird feeling of happiness in a way. Like it's like I don't know, maybe because it's like seeing something that's just, you know, simple, natural, like just the horses running.
Yeah.
It's interesting. An interesting way to end it.
It might be like a parallel to him seeing Cuddly Whiskers, what was his name? Hamster Man?
Yeah. Oh,
him going to a simple life and just relaxing. And then him seeing that is like, that's his version of a simple life as a horse.
Yeah. That's actually a good connection to make. Cause I think that is a huge part of it is, yeah, you know, maybe that's where you can find the true happiness. It's just simple life. I don't need, you know, you don't need to win an Oscar. You don't need to be a movie star. You don't need to be famous. And, you know, because clearly that hasn't worked out for him, you know, like that hasn't made him happy. So, yeah, definitely an interesting place to end the season on, I think. I feel like this is one of the most poignant endings so far in the seasons because, like, the first season ended, you know, his book was written and he kind of is like, okay, yeah, and like it's successful or whatever, and that's kind of the note you end on.
Right.
The second season, you end on the note where it's like he finally, you know, kind of fixed his relationship with Todd. And it's kind of a good, you know, not fully happy, but kind of happy ending where you're kind of like, yeah, he's doing all right again. This kind of ends in this like, I don't know, it's just an interesting place to end it. I guess
it's kind of a moment where he's on the edge and he's about to fall, and then he just catches himself just barely, and he sees something that could potentially pull him back.
Yeah, and it's something that's so simple too, you know. It's very interesting. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and there are other things happening in this episode as well, like, you know, with the other characters. Okay, you know, to shift tones, let's talk about the whole spaghetti thing in this episode. So I think this is hilarious because there's so many just random things that are just kind of happened throughout the season that all converge on this one point. So like, you know,
Mr.
in the very
randomly buying spaghetti strainers.
That was like the first episode, I think. And it's brought up multiple times. They're just like, why did I buy these? I don't know. I'll remember eventually.
Who knows?
So it's that converges onto it. The whole thing with Margot Martindale leaving in the boat with the Todd head. The Secretariat poster, you know, because that was set up earlier because it's on the blimp. It reflects the water or reflects the sunlight onto the water. The town. Business. The town under the water, the city under the water is the one that's going to be like threatened because the spaghetti's falling down on top of it.
And the business then, with all the killer whales.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all this stuff converged that was just random, different, separate things in the season all converge onto this one ridiculous story.
It all builds up to a single line. Spaghetti or not, here I come.
Spaghetti or not, here I come. Well, I also think it's funny that they're like, the only thing that would save us is if somebody had a large amount of spaghetti strainers, but also had, you know, had someone who would be really good at swimming. Like, you mean like a group of sexy orcas or sexy killer whales? Yes. And like they're saying all this stuff and like, and somebody who has the money to, you know, whatever. I don't know, you know, has a bunch of vehicles that could, I don't remember all the different things they said. And it's like, who could fit this very specific criteria? And then it just shows Mr. Peanut Butter walking by. He's like,
and
a
Todd
movie?
Desperately trying to get him to answer his phone.
Well, it's funny because all this is happening and Mr. Peanut Butter's just kind of like, ooh, let's go see Secretariat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's like, but then he goes, yeah, it's funny. Oh yeah, and then Todd's like, let's go. We got to go to Mr. Peanut Butter's house. You mean Mr. Peanut Butter's house, the show, or Mr. Peanut Butter's house, the house? The house, of course.
Obviously, that wouldn't make sense.
I don't know. It's just this hilarious thing because it's like the spaghetti strainer thing is just brought up so many times, and you're just kind of like, are they going to do something with that? Does that actually like mean anything, or is that just an ongoing joke? Nope, here it is. It became important, you know. It's just,
even though in the end, the fact that thing happened doesn't really matter in the overall story. It just happened.
No. It's again, it's one of those like just ridiculous side plots that's done for just the comedic value, and you know, you get more Margot Martindale's shenanigans too, where she's like trying to play chicken with this boat just because she's that insane.
Yeah,
and she's like talking to the Todd head. Yeah, it is kind of hilarious. I just think it's such a, I just love how it's all these separate things throughout the season that all converge on this one thing.
It's so ridiculous and like so patchwork that it almost seems like they just did a bunch of random things throughout the series and then try to come up with something that would fit it all later. Like it wasn't planned out at the start.
I feel like it was, but I see what you mean.
But it's so ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty hilarious. But yeah, and then I mean, the rest of this episode is just kind of seeing where the characters end off the season on. You know, it's the finale episode, so like, you know, Princess Carolyn makes the decision to start a management business instead, which is what's the difference between being a manager and an agent? What?
It's totally different. What are you talking about?
She's like, yeah, an agent tries to get their clients new jobs, and a manager manages their career. Isn't that the same thing? No, they're totally different. And then Diane gets a new job as well. She goes to like the mouse's like sister has her like online company thing. Right. Girl Crush. That's so Crush. Which seems like a very like, you know, feminist, you know, social justice type of thing. You know,
borderline perfect. An unhealthy version of it. Yeah. Because like in the interview, she talks about, you know, would you betray your own husband for this? Oh,
that's true. Yeah. What if he does something, you know, that's right. Like that company he owns that's pretty sexist. And she's like, well, he sold it. Yeah, but like, you know, what if something else happens? Yeah. That's true. But yeah, so that's sort of setting up what she's going to be doing in the next season, you know? And then
Todd sells his share.
Oh yeah,
and so does Emily, and they have ice cream.
And Todd accidentally tips the waiter $8 million. The waitress $8 million.
And she's just like, "Thank you so much," and that's it.
He just laughs at it. I just tipped her $8 million. Ha ha ha! Now I'm broke again. Like it's just like, you know,
whatever.
But and that's also the conversation they have where she's like, it's okay. She's like, I mean, what's the deal? Like you know, sometimes it seems like you're into me, but you don't. And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, well, are you like gay? He's like, it's totally okay if you are. And he's like, I don't know. I don't think I'm gay. He's like, but I don't think I'm straight either.
I don't know. Maybe
nothing.
Yeah.
Which is also sort of, and that's sort of the thing that's been hinted at throughout the season, because, you know, every time she's like wants to have sex with him, he's just kind of like, I don't know about that, I don't want to. So
he just avoids it. Yeah.
And they do play more with that in the future as far as his character goes, because there is a word for it. He says, I might be nothing. There is a word for it, obviously. I mean, asexual is the word. And they explore that more in the future. So that's kind of the setup for that, which is good, because it's kind of like they're doing something with the character of Todd beyond just him being the funny shenanigans character.
Yeah,
he continues
it's an actual growth.
Yeah, he continues with a lot of ridiculous shenanigans, but he's also has stuff going on with the character as well. So it's always, that's good. But yeah, I think that's mostly it. Yeah, they also set up that the Mr. Peanut Butter's ex-wife shows up because they want him to run for governor. She's like, we want you to run for governor. Of California? Yes, of California. Where else? Because, you know, California is known for like having governors who are like famous actors and stuff. Like they had like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I think they've had at least one or two more, because, you know, obviously, I mean, it's California, you know, LA, and
weird.
Hollywood is there. Hollywood is there. So yeah, that's sort of setting up more plot for the next season as well. Which is funny, because like Mr. Peanut Butter would not make a good governor.
No, he'd just be like, yeah, sure, this taxes, yay.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like they want somebody who's electable because he's such a nice guy, you know?
Yeah.
Such a nice, likable guy. So they want somebody that they can get elected so they can have on there. You know, it's all like this game kind of, you know, like politics is in real life. It's kind of a ridiculous game.
Popularity party and nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I don't know if I have much more to say on that. I mean, we're already at 2.5 hours here, so we should be closing anyways.
Only thing I have to mention about this season, it had the joke that made me laugh the most out of all of them, which oddly was just the simple throwaway line of, do you plan on just keep doing ridiculous things your whole life? And Bojack goes, do you mean as a career or just in general? Which really got to me for some reason.
Yep. There's a lot of really good, just little throwaway lines here and there throughout the show. Like in the last season, your favorite line was the
slap my salami, that guy's a commie.
Yep. But yeah, no, I'm definitely excited for the next season. I think the next season might be my favorite, season 4. I've still debated on that. I've always said season 4 was my favorite, but I don't know. I'm always kind of debating on what my favorite season of the show is. It's kind of always back and forth, which is why it's nice to rewatch, because, you know, season 6, I'm pretty sure I've only seen like one time, so it'll be nice when we get to that too. But
all right. So next week we are going to do a movie discussion, and we did talk about it a little bit beforehand. We were a little prepared finally, because usually we're like, wait, what movie? Oh, we have no clue. And we have to like go through a whole thing to find one. So we were thinking possibly doing, because remember last time 2 weeks ago when we discussed a movie, you were looking at like a movie roulette thing, and one of the ones that came up, it was The Dark Knight was one of them, and then Shawshank Redemption was one of them. So we did The Dark Knight, so we were thinking of possibly doing The Shawshank Redemption for our next movie. So it's a good movie. I like it. So I guess it's decided that's what we're going to talk about next week. Is The Shawshank Redemption. Do you know much about the movie? No. I of course know the name, The Shawshank Redemption, but that is the extent of my knowledge.
Okay, so you'll be going in blind. Do you
Yeah.
know like any of the actors who are in it or anything like that?
No.
Okay, well, it's another movie with Morgan Freeman, just like The Dark Knight had Morgan Freeman. So, more Morgan Freeman. Yeah, I've seen the movie like once, a few years ago. I think I think it was a couple of years ago at this point that I saw it, like 2 years ago. So it's been a little bit. So yeah, it'll be nice to see it again, and talk about it. It's a really good movie, I think. So yeah. So that'll be next week, and then the week after that, we're going to continue our Bojack discussion by talking about season 4. So that'll be really exciting. I'm excited for it because I love Bojack so much. Anyways, thank you all for listening to WABAN this week. Wherever you're listening to it. There's multiple places you could listen to WABAN on, in case you are wondering. It is available on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is called Nim TV. That's NIMTV. There's multiple different playlists for it there. So there's like playlists specifically for the episodes that are movie discussions. There's a playlist for guest episodes. There's a playlist for our Avatar discussion. There's even a playlist for our Bojack Horseman discussion. So they, separate playlists so you can, if you want to just listen to specific episodes, that's on YouTube. And then the podcast is also available on multiple different audio platforms, including Anchor. It is also available on Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So you should be able to find it on any of those if you just search WABAN on there. So yeah, thank you all for listening. Oh yes, and you can expect a new episode of WABAN every Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So that's our schedule. So yeah, check us out next week.
You should really try to shorten that, I have to say.
Yeah, whatever. It's fine.
No one's going to listen to that every time.
Yeah, but, it's good to have, just in case. I don't know. Whatever. It's okay. We are the most... we're very professional, though. We are the most professional podcast.
Of course, yeah.
We should change the name to The Professional Podcast, So, yeah. Anyways, thank you all for listening. I've been Nim.
And I'm the goodest boy.
Goodbye, everyone.